Hi, everyone, and welcome to my 2024 Best Fiction Books of the Year. I'm really excited for a multitude of reasons. One, another year, another list of favorite things, but hopefully they will love it too. You will love it too. But also because marks the end of my fourth year on BookTube. But I start my fifth year, and this is officially my fifth end of year best of books. I did start like my first year of my best of books on the previous year. And so something really exciting to be here today on this channel. It may not be my different channel, and I may not be very consistent, but to be here after 5 years, or at least my fifth annual list, is really exciting and really satisfying. With all that said, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited that you're here with me, and I greatly appreciate your time and attention. So let us go ahead and begin. So this list, 10 books, fiction books, and you can expect my nonfiction list later this week or later next week. They are ranked from worst to best or best to bestest best. And of course, it's somewhat subjective and they can fluctuate. And honestly, the final two are extremely close, but I'll talk about those when we get there. First up, we have Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. And this is one that was on my 5-star prediction list, and one that I've heard so many great things about that I kept saying I was going to read and kept pushing off. And finally, the year has come where I finally read this amazing fiction kind of collection. This is a series of chapters that follow different women of different types in their life, in their experiences, in the modern day and in the past, and sort of looking at how they all face life, how they all approach living their life, and how that intersects with one another, how they each have opposing views that also sort of feed into one another. And it's just this amazing, honestly, really compelling character analysis of all these different women living their own life, their own unique perspective throughout the decades. There's just something really powerful and frankly, really just impressive at her ability, the author's ability to craft such a diverse and wide range of perspectives in this not collection. It's not a collection because they all sort of connect, and it's supposed to be a fiction book, but I won't lie. My biggest disappointment with this book was that it kind of was a collection, and I wouldn't have minded a bit more interconnectedness, but I don't let that fool you. I mean, this book was phenomenal. It is phenomenal as it is. It's just a little bit different than I was expecting. Still, this book, amazing, highly recommend, and hope you check it out if you haven't already. I mean, I'm kind of late to the party on this one. Okay, next up we have a horror thriller, No Road Home by John Fram. This is a horror thriller that leans heavily into the horror side. It follows this man who is newly married, or at least engaged, into the super religious family. We're talking a mega church family, the one who goes on TV and scams a bunch of people out of their money. I mean, don't get me wrong, every church scams people out of money, but this one is like, top tier. And it follows him as he brings his child, who is themselves genderqueer, to this family, and it creates this dynamic of having to navigate the social situation where they are judging this child for not being clearly one gender or the other, as a super religious family. And then while they're here, it basically becomes a murder mystery. That is I think the setup of the book. And it is this power dynamic of trying to figure out, one, who done it, but also navigate the reality that he is in this isolated town, this isolated location of this super wealthy family with all sorts of power. And while this is all happening, we sort of get a better understanding of his background as well as the family's background. And it is this analysis of trauma, religious trauma, especially as it relates to religious trauma for queer people, and how trauma can push or mold people into monsters, basically. And it's not to say that people who experience trauma are therefore going to become bad people. Rather, it just looks at the way in which trauma can have this negative effect on people. And overall, this book worked for me, one, because it was just a really compellingly crafted thriller murder mystery, and also because of the religious trauma and the queer themes that were just rife throughout this book. And as a queer person who grew up religious, it is easy to see why this one works so well. A lot of these books are very queer, actually. Queerness and religious trauma and gender conformity, it's all a major theme in a lot of the books that I'm going to be presenting today. And this one was just so much fun. It is a 2024 release. I so lucky to get it granted as an ARC. I can highly recommend it. I think my biggest critique for this one is, well, the story was compelling, and I think had some really interesting things to say, or rather did a lot of interesting things with these themes. I think the conclusion was a bit rushed. Part of that was in trying to turn these somewhat stereotypical characters into more well-rounded people. I think it tried to sort of shoehorn in certain aspects of their analysis, their characterization at the end in a way that just didn't work. It all sort of came together to conclude the story in a way that was a little too clean and tidy, while also not really giving us time to sit in this characterization. And this is a minor critique. It's 4.5 book. It's still one of my best of lists, honestly, and I highly recommend it. But I would say that it could have been better. I can identify ways in which the book could have been better, in my opinion, like objectively better, I think. Next up, we have A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, another one that I had heard so much about for so long, and I finally got around to. This one, again, is 4.5 stars. And what I loved about this was it's sort of this found family book that is just really cute and is really heartwarming on one side, while also being, I think, just a really creative science fiction book. It's a book that I think creates a really well-crafted universe of characters and worlds and dynamics that honestly mirrors or rather reflects real world, that is to say our world dynamics, the like interracial or international sort of different dynamics that we have, that we interact with each other, the different cultural practices, things like that. It's all a part of what's going on in this book in a way that I think I found what really believable. Like, it's this world that is, I think, overly cutesy. I think hopeful is the word I'm looking for. But with that hopefulness comes a world that's still, from a speculative side, I think is really well crafted in a way that makes this book work so expertly for me as a scientist who studies space. And I remember reading The Expanse, that really super popular series, like a year before this. The Expanse was just so disappointing, both because I thought the characters were lacking, but also because of the world building just didn't really feel there. And while for this one, this cute story of these characters that I absolutely adore had this world that worked with it, this world that complemented it so well. And I've heard so many great things about this book, and honestly, I thought it was going to be a favorite of the year. Like, it is favorite of the year. I thought it was going to be in the top, higher up. But I've been lucky this year to have so many books that I've just absolutely adored, including this one. Okay, and yet again, I am surprised with myself. This is in my bottom half of this list. That is Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. Ted Chiang's first story collection. And I say this because I absolutely adored this. I gave it 4.5 stars, mostly because they didn't all hit super hard, but it's easily it's one of the best short story collections I've ever read. It's Ted Chiang, again, like other authors, deals with themes related to, I guess, just existence and religiosity, what it means to be human. I don't know, it's just a huge plethora of different themes and ideas in these worlds that are speculatively based in a way that is not always necessarily brand new, but I think thought-provoking in a way that hasn't been done before. The problem with a lot of speculative short stories, in my opinion, is that it's hard to really create a world that feels real or feels fully realized in such a small package. And if there's one person who could do it, it is Ted fucking Chiang. He is the best at doing that. And that's why this is such easy book to recommend, to say how much I absolutely adore this. Ted Chiang, this one in his first collection, absolutely has to be read. It's just one of the things I hate most. He has 2 books, like 2 collections, and I want more, and it's just so sad that we have to live in this world where we only have 2 books by Ted Chiang for the time being. But still, at least we can talk about how much we love them. I hope you check it out. Let's move on to the next one. The Skin Was Once Mine and Other Stories by Eric LaLaRocca. Eric LaLaRocca is genderqueer, non-binary, I believe. And this book is a horror collection that looks at family trauma, religiosity, queerness, and is it hard to understand why that would work for me? The writing is beautiful, the themes are powerful, and I guess just the characterization in all this is just so perfect. Like, the way in which we get these worlds that just looks at family dynamics, the way in which I guess it's a religiosity and queerness. Just, I feel like I'm just using a bunch of buzzwords. So how do I explain this well? Basically, these are a series of short stories that are unnerving, and it's disturbing. It's disturbing type of horror. And then I will say that, like, disturbing horror, body horror, these are things that are some of my favorite types of horror. You couple that with the themes about queerness and religiosity and just fucked up family dynamics, and that just works so well for me. And I was amazed, one, because I've been wanting to read this author for so long, and I finally got to this one collection. And I don't know, like, will I love all their work as much as this one? I'm not sure, but I always love finding a new favorite horror writer, and right now it's easy to say that I think Eric LaRocca might be just that. And I found out that they're coming out with their first fiction book next year. I will absolutely be checking it out. But in the meantime, if you want to try out some of the work, I can say this one is a solid choice. It's pretty short, easy to read. I would just say it's disturbing. It is disturbing and unnerving, but in all the best ways for horror, in my opinion. As you mentioned, that book was 5 stars. We're now in our 5-star categories, and we're now in our top 5, though. So, as much as I loved all those books, including Eric Lala-Rocha's, it's just been it's been a tough year for all these books. It's just this a tough category, is what I'm trying to say, because I've had so much that I've loved. I had to make a choice. Now I'm questioning my life choices. The next one, number 5, is The Last Dragoneers of bowbazar. Bowbazar. The Last Dragoneers of Bowbazar by Andrew Doss. Andrew Doss is probably best known, although still not well known, for The Devourers, which is a werewolf story in the same vein as in the same vein as Anne Rice's A Vampire Chronicles. I just realized I started to blab about The Devourers, which I also loved. But this book is, I think, even less well known than that other book, which I just think Andrew Doss is woefully underrated. They are also a non-binary queer author who writes horror stories, or I guess it's fantastical stories. Because this book is not horror. This is actually more like Ursula K. Le Guin's type story, where it follows this young kid, young adult, who is male at birth, but part of the story is seeing their relationship with their family, with their past. They're basically immigrants from a country that isn't clear. The family has this old story of being dragoners, people who would control or ride dragons back in their homeland, and it's this sort of mythos that exists around their family, and this story that would be told to everyone in their family. But now they're just immigrants trying to get by, and you have this young adult. I'm not sure where he's at actually. I think it might be somewhere in India, but I digress. It follows their family. We sort of get this sort of light backstory about this mythos, and it's one of those situations where it's not presented as necessarily being hard fantasy. If anything, if there's any fantasy, it's very just lightly hinted at. Like, is this real? How much of the story is just family lore, things like that. And in my opinion, that's fine. I think what I loved about this was the main character, their relationship to their family, very loving, and the dynamics of trying to get by in this new world, while also they are meeting a girl who they really like. And in this journey, we just see them being themselves. The family has been presented as being somewhat genderqueer. We have a picture of one of the grandparents. It is hinted at that they might actually be trans, or at the very least gender nonconforming. And it's just this lightly sprinkled thing throughout the story where genderqueerness is just so normalized, just such a natural part of the family dynamic, of their family history, and of their culture, mixed in with the fantastical back lore and the characterization and the intermingling of the characters, that it warmed my heart so much. And if I'm being entirely honest, maybe this isn't my best of the best of the year. And I'm wondering if it is even deserving to be number 5. But the truth is that I'm putting it here because I think more people need to read this. More people need to read Andrew Doss in general. But this book was just beautiful. And if you like Ursula K. Le Guin, I frankly think you would love this as well, because that's really the vibes I got. I felt like I was reading one of their books. You have the story of dragons and everything, and this sort of fantastical world, and it's just sprinkled into our world, the real world, and you get glimpses into what this other world might be like, and whether or not it is real or just that sort of background lore. You have to read to find out. But that's all I'm going to say for now. Okay, continuing with the queerness. How many of these are queer? 1, 2. I just realized almost all of my books are queer. I guess I know what I like then. Okay, let me just keep going. Number 4, up to number 4, we have The Black Flamingo by D. Nada. And this is said to be a sort of poetry story, but to me it reads like a novel. I think it's just more like a long form poetry. It reads naturally, I think. I listened to the audiobook narrated by the author. It basically follows this young queer black boy who is, just trying to understand his identity in his self, and he does that. But if I remember correctly, is it taking up being a ballerina, or some form of generally considered feminine form of art to express himself. Maybe it's drag, maybe it's both, maybe it's just drag. I read this back in February. It's been a while, and it's just this journey of self-acceptance, of understanding who he is, and at its core, I think it's just a story of celebration. There are hints of the type of trauma that I have to endure as a young queer boy, especially as a young queer black boy. I think that the expectations are different, but at its core, I think what I loved most about this was that it just felt like a story of celebration, where it wasn't really digging deeply into the trauma so much as just this celebration of life and of his life and of the queer joy that he has to express himself, specifically through drag. Well, drag is one of the most celebratory forms of art in the queer community, in my opinion. This, again, is one that could so easily be a contender for best of the year just because of how much I absolutely adore this. I would call this book perfection in my opinion. The reason it's not higher really is just a matter of themes and characterization that resonate with me just a little bit more effectively than this one does. This one clearly works for me and resonates with me at my core. You have the queerness, you have the gender nonconformity that I just really like. I love it, and if you haven't read it, it's an easy read. It's definitely worth reading, and you should check it out. It's a lot of fun. Okay, continuing on now with the poetic queer stories we have on Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, and this is, I don't think, poetry. It is again following the story of coming of age. Young queer boy who is Asian. I believe is an Asian immigrant. I believe it's supposed to mirror his life. That is to say, Ocean Vuong's, who is himself queer. And it basically is a character analysis of him growing up, or at least someone like him, and their relationship to their mother. And I think, again, it's his mother. He clearly has had such a strong bond with his mother because it's apparent in this story and just the sort of biography that it feels like, even though it's a pretty short fiction. And for me, it is the family dynamics coupled with the queer experience that's being explored here, the trauma mixed with the celebration of the queer love and just the queer identity that, like Black Flamingo, works so well with me. I think what I like more about this, the reason it might be a bit higher, even though to me, in my mind, they're actually very similar books, is that this one is not young adult. It is an adult book that I think takes a more realistic, and I think for that reason, a slightly more immersive and just more captivating, or more resonating book to me at my core. Even again, it is also an intersectional story about what it means to be young and queer, immigrant and Asian at that. And like I said, his writing is poetic, even if the story itself is not necessarily poetic. This is one of those books where I feel like I will probably reread just because it's so beautifully performed by Ocean Vuong himself, and because I just feel like there's probably deeper details there that I missed, because it just feels like such a dense prose in a way that it's not necessarily hard to follow so much as just a lot to be gained from it. Now we're on our final two, and I won't lie, these were so hard, so goddamn hard to choose. I was going to go with the first one, and we'll talk about it. It's going to be Model Home by River Solomon. This is one of my favorite books by them. Again, what is it about? Is there religious trauma? I don't remember. There's definitely family trauma, family dynamics, siblings, and what it means to be queer, and I think gender queerness. It's basically about a haunted house, or is the house haunted, or is it just a family abuse? Also, intersect into that, of course, you have race dynamics. As this Black family is growing up or has moved into an affluent white neighborhood, where you have really surreal and weird, which is to say uncomfortable interactions with white people that are part of the story that is, I think, really contributes to the unnerving side of the horror, not to mention just the general unnerviness of the supposed haunting of the house. And what I loved about this was that it was both a character analysis of the family, of the siblings, the family dynamics, the racial dynamics, the what it is that, like, when we think about what is a haunting, and what is the cause behind it, is the haunt real, is it not? And it's very much a psychological book that walks the line of, is it real or is it psychological? This book, again, another one that would have been so easily a surprise just because of, I knew I would like it, but the fact that I loved it as much as I did was what really shook me. Again, I think it's just the family trauma, the queerness, the gender queerness, and the sibling dynamic, the love, but also tension that's there that I could so easily resonate with. This was, I think, 3 siblings, and I have 2 sisters. If you don't count my step siblings. And for me, I understand that like so well. And again, it's personal. That's why these are so high up. It's also just an expertly crafted book. It's very compelling. It's very thought-provoking, as River Solomon always is. They never cease to disappoint in that sense. But it is just the personal side that resonates with me. The fact that I also love a good haunting story. And this one is that. The fact that it is so capable of walking this line of being supernatural or psychological and still, I think, be really unnerving as a haunting story, I think it's just a real work of craftsmanship craftsmanship to be able to craft a horror book so effectively like they have here. I'm sitting here wondering, should this be number one? And ultimately, I will explain to you why it's not as we get to number one, the Angel of Indian Lake trilogy, or specifically, if I have to pick one, it's going to be the second one. Don't Feel the Reaper, book 2. Now, I loved all of these. I think the reason I would highlight number 2, and I don't want to spend too much time because I did have a dedicated review to this entire series. I highly recommend you check that out. I had so much to say about it. I absolutely adored it. What I loved about this series at its core is it is a love letter to horror films, to slashers, and it does so by having fun with the genre in a playful way that I think will work with any horror fan, while also looking again at real-world social dynamics, especially when it comes to the main character being indigenous and her experience growing up in a home that has struggles and in a town that judges her for that or for her identity. And you integrate those themes, or the exploration of these themes, into, again, the horror tropes and just the horror fun that's going on and the homages to horror. And again, it works with me on a personal level. I love horror, I love slashers, and I love classic horror. So you get these rich themes, and you integrate them into just what is a love letter to horror and to horror films. And again, it just works for me on a visceral level. And I think what I loved most about the second book was that the first book, I think, ended in a way that felt really conclusive and really just a good ending. And what we get with the second book was a demonstration of the ability to continue the story that I don't think undermines the first story, that I think is not just a rehash of the first book, in the sense that, while it is the same idea, the same things going on, I think we have a shift in the story dynamic and the characters. The characters are at a clearly different point in their lives where they've progressed, they've grown. It allows for them to explore new character arcs, new ways forward that is new and but also natural and earned, while also creating a new dynamic for the story to explore, a new social and also horror dynamic for us to enjoy. And again, in a way that doesn't rehash the first one. It's not just like most slashers, honestly, it's just the exact same premise or the exact same setup all over again. It's entirely new characters, and it is just that ability to work so well with the themes, with the characterization, and the horror homages, and just the compelling narrative overall that makes this series and this book work so fucking well for me. If I wasn't putting them all together, I wouldn't be surprised if book 2 and 3 were both on this list, because I have them both this year. But for me, this is probably my favorite series of all time, and it's up there close to the Larry Children series. This one probably takes the cake right now, and it is easily my favorite series or favorite set of books by Stephen Graham Jones. I've really liked his work up to now, and this is the first time it's really resonated with me as strong as it has, which is why I'm so excited to be here just learning about it. I don't think this is anything new. Most people have heard about this series, which I'm glad. I'm glad Stephen Graham Jones is getting the attention he deserves. But with all that said, I absolutely adored this, and it's still hard to say, does this deserve to be higher than Model Home? Because I think they both work for me in different ways. And in a lot of ways, I can appreciate Model Home for being so powerful in such a small package. But I think it's just having so much to love about the Indian Lake trilogy, Angel of Indian Lake trilogy, that I think puts it just a little bit higher in my mind, at least at this point in time. This is all subjective, and it changes with the day. But that is everything. Those were all of my favorite fiction books. I'd say the top 10 favorite fiction books of the year. This was a long one. I had a lot of fun filming it, though, even though I had a lot of interactions with my family. Just because I really have loved these books. I've had such a great year. Life has been tough in their own unique ways. I'm sure everyone has their own struggles. And it's just always nice to look back on the year and be able to say, at least this was a good reading year. I had fun. I had a lot of great books that I loved, and I'm just very happy where I'm leaving this year. And but it's not over yet. The year's not over, neither are my end of year videos. So make sure you stick around, subscribe, like and subscribe, and check out my nonfiction best of list coming in within a week of this, I'm sure. Thanks again for watching. If you made it to the end, I really appreciate you. Any of you who's watched a little bit and just don't to the end, I still appreciate you as well. And I hope you have a great day. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.